You know what, again, just another tough day. It seems we were just back here in March having similar announcements. And so it's a tough day standing in front of our student athletes or Zooming in front of our student athletes and having these conversations, and certainly disappointed for them as they're all competitive and want to compete. But we want to create, we take a lot of pride in our student athlete experience and creating a healthy and safe environment for them. And it's really challenging to do that in these times. And so I think we've made the right decision as a conference, and, we'll work with all of our student athletes now to figure out what this means for, the rest of their fall, and then what we're going to possibly do in the spring as we work through that. So, I'll take questions and try to answer the best I can from what I know at this moment. Just like 2 months ago, I wouldn't have even thought that we'd be in this situation. So we were heading down a really good path, and now that has since changed. So fire away. Greg, how do you want to do this? You want to have them just fire away, or do you want to have them raise hands? What do you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, if they want to fire away right now, I can unmute anybody, or they should be able to unmute on their own, or let me know. But yeah, I mean, certainly fire away. Just announce who you are so Scott knows who's talking.
Scott, Tom Helmer. Can you just kind of walk me through the last 48 hours? And obviously this was an extremely tough decision for the conference, but kind of how the conversation evolved maybe since Thursday to getting to where we are today?
Yeah, I think really the conversation has been the same for the last month or so, and having conversations in the athletic director room, and I'm sure in the president's room. I won't speak for them, but and then having conversations with our coaches and our student athletes, and there's always been, can we go full bore? Can we do some semblance of, especially when you're talking football versus, volleyball and soccer was already to a conference only, wasn't going to start till the end of September. And then do we move everything to the spring? And when you really start to actually sit down with your student athletes and explain what camp will look like, and then what every week of competition will look like with testing and tracing, and the stress that they're already under, and then to include that on top of their classroom work and being social distance in the classroom and being online and half not, and then having these discussions about testing on a Tuesday before a Friday volleyball match, traveling to the location and finding out while you're there that somebody's positive, and then you're tracing and you can't play and you got to head home, and all of a sudden you only have 16 games. You were supposed to have 30. Now you're down to 16, and then you lose 3 or 4 or 6 because of being quarantined. When you really start to map it out with them, there's a lot of, you talk about mental health. That was a big concern. So those are the kind of discussions you're having when you're going through this process. And so, I think the president's made the right decision today, and opting to go to the spring and let us really focus on our student athletes' health and well-being, and see if we can't make it a safer, better environment come springtime.
Scott, Alex Alvarado. You said this is the right decision that was made by the presidents today, but do you believe that this is a decision that also should have been made maybe before today, maybe last week, maybe a couple weeks ago? What's your sense on that?
It's always tough to try to figure out when is the right time. I certainly feel like our teams that are here, our football team's been practicing, volleyball is getting together, soccer, that they're in a safe environment. I'm not worried about the environment that we're providing for them right now. And they each have their own bubbles and are doing a really good job with that. I think The challenge is when you start talking about traveling to a location and getting in a van or getting in a bus or getting on a plane and you're in a hotel. That's where the challenges come in. And then the interacting of soccer players against each other or football players tackling each other. That's where some of the challenges come in. So we had some time, but eventually you've got to make a call and have that, so our student athletes know, and obviously we're right around camp time. Volleyball was just starting, soccer just starting, football. And so I think they felt like now's the best time, hindsight, maybe you could have pulled it a little bit sooner so they didn't even get to camp or before they got to campus. But again, we're in a pretty safe environment right now. So even if we made the decision a week later, but everybody's got schedules and you're trying to balance that as well. And so no time is perfect.
Hey, Scott, Evan Petzold here from the Free Press. Thanks for doing this. Just a couple of questions for you. Was this inevitable? I mean, I know that's been a huge conversation across, whether it's youth leagues, high school, college, professional. Just is this even possible to happen? And I guess kind of, from your standpoint, was this decision kind of just a wait for it to happen thing in a way? Is that your perception of it?
Yeah, I would say that 2 months ago, no, I would, middle of June, first part of June, and the state of Michigan was doing well. And I thought across the country, we had a pretty good handle on things that I felt pretty comfortable as we're moving in. That's why we brought people back and started working on that. Had I known that gyms weren't going to open and weight rooms weren't going to open, I probably would have had a different case. But come middle of June, we thought we were in a pretty good spot. But when you talk about being inevitable or it was coming, in my gut, over the last few weeks, I've felt like this was a really viable chance that this would happen. And so it doesn't surprise me, that we landed where we're at with it.
For sure. And you mentioned too, looking back into March, you kind of said that's, things kind of spiraled down, real fast in March. And we saw that, with the tournaments and thoughts on, a domino effect, a chain reaction. I mean, do you think that this is something that jumpstarts that?
I mean, every conference is going to have to make their own decision, just like, we've looked at other conferences. I mean, we didn't sit around the table and talk about what the other leagues are doing. We were focused on what is this doing for us and where are we at in the process. So could it? Certainly. I mean, there's certainly a narrative out there that could happen. I personally believe that the MAC has done a really good job of caring about our student athletes, and we've been on the forefront of mental health and on diversity, inclusion, and equity, and having other initiatives that others aren't doing, or we're the first ones out the gate. And this is just one of those where we've got good leadership. And I think when you turn around and lead or go off of your medical advisors, and we met with our medical docs, our leadership team Monday, and the discussions in there, I mean, it makes it a lot easier to look a student athlete in the eye and say, I know you're disappointed because you really want to play, but your health and safety is more important than playing half a season or part of a season or starting you and pulling you off. So,
right.
You domino.
Well, maybe a better way to phrase that would have been, in 2 days or 2 weeks or whatever it might be, would it shock you if they decided to shut it down across the board?
No. And personally, it kind of disappointed me a little bit because, I mean, we're all, they have student athletes just like us and our doctors and what they're telling us. And, we all have to go with what our different advices are, but no, it wouldn't shock me if some followed suit. And actually, I would be surprised if some didn't, in just my personal opinion.
For sure. And last one for me, moving the football season specifically to the spring and trying to make that happen. If other teams were to follow suit, right, as, the thought is that might be the case, what would that mean for some of those, non-conference games, hoping to get some of those back? I'm sure that would help you guys, recoup a good amount of the finances there. And I know it's tough for everybody right now. So how big of a benefit would that be from just a financial standpoint to just keep things going?
the way you phrase it, it could certainly help us, but it's not something that we've even discussed or talked about. And I'm sure, John and the conference have started to look at that and see what makeup that would look like. But you're right. It depends on who's staying in the fall and if they try to figure it out versus waiting till the spring. And then how big a schedule can you have? And then what does that do for the fall the following year? I mean, those are all things that we've got to have discussions about. And I think John mentioned it today. I mean, I think we need coaches' input. We need student athletes' input. People have a lot of questions. Are we just doing a conference only? Are we going to get a couple non-conference games in? Is it better to have a couple non-conference and maybe shrink down and only play your division? I mean, I don't know. We haven't really gotten into that, and those will be now our next steps. As we talk with our student athletes right now, it's basically, this is the decision that's been made. Now we got to go back to the drawing board and what does fall look like? And then what does your spring look like? And those are things that'll come up over the next few weeks.
Right. For sure. Thanks a ton. I appreciate it.
Yep. No, thank
Ralph
you.
from the AP would like to sneak in a question next.
Thanks. Thanks, Scott, for doing this. So this might be a little down the road, but I'm interested in if you've had any conversations with ESPN about their desire to, be a partner with you in the spring and what that might look like.
All of that conversation is usually at the conference level. And so I know John had reached out to our partners today, letting them know the decision that the presidents voted on and decided. And so I'm not sure where that is. And I don't know what that means for our contract or, number of dates. Maybe we can offer that in the spring, and maybe we can even offer more as an opportunity. And, I kind of joked with somebody and, they're said, you mean no MACtion this fall? And I said, well, we might have March MACtion, who knows? We'll figure that out as we go.
Thank you.
Yep.
Jamie, would you like to ask a question? Or Chris?
Yeah, Scott, have you guys heard anything about what this means for the college football playoff payouts that go to Group of Five, or is that still yet to be determined?
That's a really good question, because we don't know. I think John tried to reiterate a little bit. He's not sure, the financial impact of the decision yet. I'm certain that he's probably had some behind the scenes conversations of what ifs if we got down that path. But I don't know where we're at from that regard. And then I think there's, again, could be a domino, right? If there are others that go, it may look different. If we're the only one that doesn't do it, then that's a different story as well. So I'm sure it comes to ESPN and bowl partners and CFP. Those are all discussions we're going to have. Yeah.
And how hard have these past few months just been on you, and just having to deal with this and not knowing answers and having to talk to people and just personally?
Yeah, it's miserable, and everything changes so often. And, it's just been it's a whirlwind, because you as leaders, you lead people and you guide them, and you can help set goals and have expectations and do this. And then now we're in uncertainty. And so I'm sitting up and I feel like I'm saying one thing to our staff, and literally an hour later it changed. And then you got to come back and you almost feel like you sound stupid as you're talking to them. And so it's been tough. And then at night and this part really weighed on me as far as going to the spring or not, and was really heavy on my heart with, talking to the president and what's best for our student athletes. And I'm going to put my head on the pillow tonight and feel a little bit of relief in a way, because I really do feel like our kids, as disappointed there are a lot of kids that are having a sigh of relief right now. There were a lot of concern, and there were a lot of just unknowns. And yeah, they might not like it. It's not perfect, but it gives us some time to figure out what's best for them. So,
I have two questions. This is Jamie from Channel 4.
Mhm.
I don't have my video on because I'm not
Okay.
camera ready, as
Okay.
they say.
All good.
Okay, my first question is fall sports moving to spring a definite?
I would say that that's not a definite. I think we have to have conversations. I think soccer and volleyball are a little bit easier, but then what does that mean as the student athlete experience? And again, how many contests are we offering? When are we offering them? And really laying that out, and then understanding your roster and what does that mean for, you got to think about each individual has a different preference on this. Some may want to try to graduate and get out of here. Others want to come back and compete. Others are already on their 5th or 6th year, and now is this a 6th or 7th year? What does it mean financially from scholarship point of view, and those things as well. So there's a lot to be determined with that. When you think of football, they come here to play 12 games. They come here to play 1 or 2 Power Fives and then go try to win a championship and then go to a bowl game. And now if that's all of a sudden just 8 games, and then the unknowns of, are we still testing? Is it still around? Is there a vaccine? I mean, there's all sorts of things. Volleyball the same way. They came here to play 30 matches, not just a handful. And what does that mean? As I'm a senior, do I want to come back? So I think we got to have a lot of those discussions and then map out what that looks like before we can truly say we're going to do everything we can to try to compete in the spring, and we think that's best. But at the end of the day, we may not completely. So I wouldn't say it's 100%.
Okay, and then my second question is, how did you tell the student athletes?
How have we communicated to them?
Correct.
Yeah. So my first conversation was we had a meeting right after the presidents with the athletic directors. And so then I got the 5 head coaches on a Zoom call to immediately tell them before the release went out. So at least they knew, but news had already broke that was coming. And so a lot of them had already gotten text messages from student athletes. And then I've communicated with them to obviously pass down to the student athletes, and then have offered to do Zooms, or actually some of them will do in person and social distance and have those conversations. So football, we've actually already had our Zoom meeting earlier this afternoon, and met with the whole team and kind of talked them through and tried to answer questions that I could, and then basically have more to come. I have another one tonight with men's cross country, another one tomorrow with women's cross country, and then we've got soccer and volleyball on Monday in person. So we're going to kind of walk through, but the coaches have communicated with them. We also sent out an all staff and all student athlete email, just letting them know what the decision that was made, and so they're aware and not caught off guard.
Thank you very much. And thanks for doing the Zoom with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jamie.
Scott, one of the questions in the chat was from Roy Akers. He wanted to know, did EMU give student athletes a worst case scenario earlier in the summer that a season may or may not happen? And if he did the kids consider a partial season a win?
I would say that we've always been open with the coaches and student athletes that there are a number of, we're going to try to play a full season, but there may be an opportunity to go smaller and consolidate a little bit. And then obviously we had done that, we had delayed. And then there was always the option that we could possibly end up going to the spring. And so I think I was very transparent in our head coaches meetings, our all staff meetings, and then passing that down to our student athletes as well. So they're not surprised that this happened today. There's none of that. There were a number of conversations. It's been really interesting. Our young men and women are really bright when they're thinking about their own situations and their eligibility, and having a conversation with, a couple of the football guys yesterday, talking about playing 8 or 9 games. And they're like, I didn't sign up for 8 or 9. I want to play 12. And if we play 8 or 9, maybe I'll only play 4 and I'll redshirt and then I'll come back next year. And, they're thinking about all of these situations. So I think we did a pretty good job of letting them know kind of where things could be, and we'll pivot based on whatever decisions are made. and then we'll talk about what each of those decisions mean to each individual person. So I think we've done a fairly good job with that, and obviously I haven't personally talked to every one of them, but we've passed it on through the chain.
Tony, I know you're on here. Would you like to ask? I know you're the last one that hadn't asked a question yet.
Yeah, Scott, you and I have
Tony, I can confirm now.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, fantastic.
All right.
Let me get that on Twitter. You and I have talked finances quite a bit during this whole pandemic, but I've talked to some other athletic directors, and the thought of no football. Now, you guys think you could have it in the spring, but you said there's no guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
There's no football. How devastating could that be for your athletic department in terms of jobs? And secondly, can you give us an update on where the voluntary pay cuts stand as far as your high-profile coaches?
Yep. Yeah. So, certainly not playing football and getting the guarantee games is obviously one revenue component. And we're not sure where all that'll finish out. We haven't talked to all of the teams yet, and I've still got to have communications with Army and Coastal as well. And then obviously we don't know the CFP, ESPN, MAC distribution piece of this as well. So those are things that we'll look at, as we kind of peel this onion back now to try to figure out exactly what it means and then what it'll look like from a staffing. It's certainly worrisome as a leader in trying to figure out our budgets. But there is a lot of savings right now too. And so we can figure out if we're all on freezes from travel and how much we're saving there. So we got to really map that out. And then we'll have to see if we have a work share extension, those things. As you mentioned, work share, our work share for all of our athletic employees ended on July 31st or August 1 officially. So we are back getting ready to, go for the fall. Now, I would say the plan is for all of our student athletes is to have a normal fall, just not compete. And so we will still practice and train and do all those things. So I need trainers, I need strength and conditioning staff, I need our coaches here and just really get ready to all compete in the spring. And so, we'll just have to see where all those finances land as far as what we get and don't get, and then what that means from a staffing situation. But I certainly am concerned about it.
And just last question for me. Can you take us to the decision not to, for instance, Michigan State and Michigan have been open about releasing their positive tests. Can you take us to the decision that you guys have made, and as well as other teams in the MAC Central West haven't really discussed positive tests and how many you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that, us putting out like a weekly number really benefits anybody. And so we've just kind of chosen that, if we have it, whether it's if you send a request and ask us what our numbers are, and we give it to you in groups, that's fine. I just I really worry about our student athletes and them getting singled out or having any pressure on them, and just trying to be wise with it. And a lot of you are real smart and can figure out who they are, and to me, I want to protect them a little bit. And that was the, university wanted to go down that route. And in the MAC, I mean, we didn't really talk about it, as ADs, we all kind of just, it is what it is.
Can you tell us how many positive tests you've had since you said if we ask?
We have been at about, we had like 6% positives out of our overall tests, but we've taken well over 200, maybe over 300 now. So
last one, actually I have one more about the testing. The NCAA, when they came out with their thing last
Mhm.
week was one of the things was testing every week. Is that a financial burden for schools like you? I've heard from other schools that it is, having to test every athlete. It does come out of the college budget. Is that a concern was that a concern for you at all?
Well, yeah, I mean, budgetarily wise, it's a concern, but I would say it's a concern for Major League Baseball. It's a concern for the NFL. I mean, it's not cheap, obviously, and even U of M and Michigan State and the Power Fives. I mean, they're all in the same boat. It's not a cheap endeavor, and what people don't realize is it's only as good as the minute you took it. So you take the test, and you walk out and go just grab something to go somewhere, contract it, come back and have practice for 2 days, but you may still be negative, but you didn't even know that you were actually positive. I mean, that's the challenge with it is again, it's only a timestamp at that moment. But certainly there's a cost aspect to it. But I think us as a league, we were all prepared and ready to do that. I personally think the guidelines are really, really strict, and I just don't know if everybody's going to be able to do it. And you're putting a lot of pressure on labs, or you're going to have to outsource to specific labs to be able to get something turned around in 72 hours. And when you talk to the local hospitals, it's not that easy. They're like, well, if this one gets busy, they go to the next one, and you're just at their mercy. And it's like, well, we need to make a deal with that lab to tell them they will get it to us. And who are we? I mean, these are healthy 18 to 23-year-olds for the most part, and yet we got people that really have it that need to know about the test. And so I struggle with a lot of that too, but that's just my own personal soapbox. But yes, cost would certainly be a part of it, but we didn't talk about that in the decision-making process of this.
Right. All right. Well, thanks for confirming that. I appreciate it.
Any other follow-ups or any additional questions that you might have?
I have one just out of curiosity, Scott, as far as, let's look at football. There's no spring football, and now there's none in the fall. How is the NCAA communicating with the MAC or other as far as what's allowed, what's not allowed, what you can do with coaches, what you can't? It's pretty strict in a normal year, but now that everything is so fluid, how does that process work?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one thing I didn't even mention. You start thinking about safety and health of our kids. They haven't even been in a weight room. We've had them here since June 15th, and they can't get in a weight room, but I'm asking them in 3 weeks to go hit somebody and play, and they can't, get in their locker rooms. They can't do stuff. It's just not good. And then now the NCAA, we don't know what's going to happen, because if we're obviously the only conference on an island, how do we treat our, recruiting calendar versus everybody else versus our practice calendar, in season, out of season? You get 8 hours care of, but then you can designate days. I mean, those are things that we're going to have to work through. And again, I don't think they'll rule on any of that, and we'll have to get waivers on stuff if it's just us. Now, if other conferences do this same thing, then it'll be more of a national picture, and then they'll lay out, which is what we've done all summer. Every month something changes, and they gave some acclimation periods. They gave us some 8 hours for 10 days, and then they gave us another 10 days kind of acclimation with helmet, start to get to helmets, and then get into camp mode, which is not what we normally do. And so I could see that happening again, where they're going to have some flexibility with this and help us to make sure we're being able to train them. I mean, I think one of the biggest worries I had going into this was soft tissue injuries and just lack of not being in good health and training. It's been March, right? You said we have one spring practice, and these guys have been at home on their own, and gyms aren't open, and they're trying to make up their own weight program. And so that's part of it that, when you start to weigh all that out. So we'll see. We'll have to see how that plays out.
Scott, in watching how the leagues unfolded and made their decisions, there was the Ivy League, they made their decision. The Big Ten announced that they were going to do conference only. And then we watched just a flurry of all the Power 5 schools or leagues make up their decisions to, go conference only and limited non-conference games. Then the Group of Fives and the MAC today. should it have even come so far for the MAC to make this kind of, flipping decision to now leading to everyone saying, oh, all the other leagues, are they going to follow the MAC suit now that they're the 10th league to make a decision and now it's maybe the most important? Should things have even gotten so far to let the MAC presidents make this decision?
Yeah, that's kind of a challenge because I don't know. That's what I said earlier. I mean, whether it was 2 weeks ago or last week, I mean, again, we feel comfortable with our kids that are all on campus. I think that's the one thing in the AD room that we all talked about is like, we're not concerned about right now. It's down the road. And when we start interacting and traveling and doing that, and we don't have any students on campus right now, we just have our own bubbles and there's not a lot of interaction. So that, I think but ultimately you've got to make a decision at some point in time. And it just happened to be today for us on this. And really that's fair to even the other schools that we had contracted so they can maybe figure out what they're going to do with it. And it really doesn't affect my soccer or volleyball program or my cross country right now because most of their stuff had been canceled already except our conference matches. So, again, you can always speculate on when and where. I mean, we announced a delay a few weeks ago, to September 3rd for the sports. And then this was just the next natural thing is whether we were going to delay more or go to spring or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm. And in any conversations with health professionals, has there been any conversation about, what a football season does to a young 18 to 22-year-old, what it does to a young person's body that starts in February and then starting another, I'm saying February is just like a blanket spring month, a football season in the spring and then another one just a few months later in the fall?
Yeah, I think most of our conversations with our medical advisors has been about COVID and about, trying to understand long-term effects and the process of it. And that's been more of the focus. Now, obviously, that's why I don't, mention that we're not going to promise that we're playing in the spring because we need to look at those dynamics. Is it an 8 game, a 10 game, a 12 game? And do you really think we can play 12 games and then 12 6 months later or 4 months later or whatever that time frame is? Because you're right. I mean, it's physically takes its toll, whether they're 18 or 23 and what it does. So I think those are all things that we have to take into account, but we're certainly going to give it a try and try to do it, obviously, again, in a healthy, safe environment. And I want to have conversations with our coaches about it, with our medical advisors and our medical people. And we got, great physicians, team physicians to work with us, and then get feedback with our student athletes too, and see what's best for us in all of our fall sports.
Lisa Berry, I think from WEMU joined us. Lisa, would you like to ask a question? Lisa, you're now unmuted.
Sorry, I just got on late, so I don't know if you answered this already, but you just mentioned feedback from student athletes. Have you discussed that? How are they taking the news?
Yeah, we just had a quick Zoom with our football team earlier today. Certainly disappointed. I think a lot of them really understood. I think there's a small group of them are relieved. Some were really thinking, and a lot were just confused, not sure how this was going to play out. A lot were very concerned and may have chosen to opt out depending on what it laid out. But all of them are competitors and this is their life and they want to play. And so that disappointment is real. And so that part of it's been challenging, but also I've had a number of conversations with them about each one has their own, well, if we're only going to play 8 or 9 games, I don't want to just play 8 or 9. And then if somebody gets tested positive and I got to sit out, or if I test positive and, and they talked about, one brought up yesterday, he's like, well, if I get positive, then my roommate and other guy's going to, so you mean the freshman that has only been here for 2 weeks is going to be starting that game? And, that's not a competitive game you want to have. And it's not fair to throw him into that. And so those are real conversations that we have.
What do you mean by opt out? Are they leaving the university? Would they go that far?
No, we give options. You know, the NCAA was very clear, and we were too with our student athletes. If they just felt uncomfortable and didn't feel like wanting to play this year, that we're going to allow them to sit out the year, and that, you know, there's no recourse for that. We would let them do that. So that's what I meant by opt out.
Out of all the medical minds and bright minds in our community, are you aware of anybody working on any sort of equipment or mask or something special that the players could wear and still play the game?
Yeah, we actually had for their helmets, we had a mouth guard put in, and that's why actually we recommended that they go to helmets earlier, because helmets are actually better than wearing the mask. But then we would give them, you know, gaiters, you know, a mask that they can wear around their neck. And then when they want to take their helmet off, they can pull their gaiters up over their nose and mouth, and be able to do that. So yeah, we've been working with people on equipment, and actually we're able to provide the mouth guard shield that they call it. But I'm sure there's others coming out too. I'm sure there's other things that'll be coming out as well.
Right. And I think my biggest question is, how is Swoop taking this?
Yeah, I think Swoop is really disappointed, and I don't know if he read his Twitter yet or not. So he may not know. So we may have to inform him. But yeah, it's a tough day.
Yeah.
You know, but we're going to be very supportive of our student athletes and be there for them and try to help them get through this.
Will they keep practicing and working out over the fall and winter?
Yeah, so our plan is to continue to train all fall and get ready for the spring, and almost treat the fall like we would a normal spring to get ready. So we'll figure that out, and we'll have to figure out what the training looks like and the time commitment to it, and work with the NCAA on that.
Maybe you'll start a new tradition.
Yep. No.
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 We want to play in the fall.
Yep. All right. Well, I hear you.
Yep.
Any additional questions for anyone else?
All right. Well, you guys know how to get through Greg to get to me if you want. I'm here.